Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler. Okay, everybody, welcome to the podcast. We have Jeff Stinson here from Stinson Law.
Hello.
He's going to be joining us and telling us very helpful information about all the legalities of working with autism and the broader disability community. So, Jeff, welcome and take the floor.
Thank you very much. Well, again, by introduction, my name is Jeff Stinson. I am what they coin as an elder and special needs law attorney. Particularly what that means is we'll focus more on the special needs section as I work with a lot of families who have children with some limitations, and we're planning for what happens when that primary caregiver, that financier, that person has been that primary advocate, what happens if that person can't serve in that role anymore? Well, that's one aspect of what I do. I also work with a lot of individuals who have come across a windfall. We'll talk a little bit about planning to avoid an individual with public benefits receiving a big chunk of money. But for those that haven't planned, I will also get contacted. A lot of trial attorneys will contact me, for example, who will say, hey, Jeff, I've just settled a case for someone who has some limitations that they have public benefits. We don't want them to lose their public benefits because of this settlement. So what can you do? And that's on the other aspect of that side of my practice. So that's kind of what I do. Now, this is something I've been in for, almost 25 years now. I was lucky enough to kind of as just a happenstance, I was working for an elder and special needs law firm, and the attorney that was working in that special needs area had started his own practice and had just moved out. And there was a little flyer on my boss's desk one day that said, special needs conference in Florida. And I said, you know what, you want to send me to that? And he says, we need somebody to take that practice. If you're serious, let's do it. So
great. That's
how I did my toe in it. Of course, I found it to be very, very helpful over the years. I said, we have IAPs and things like that. That's been very helpful to have that knowledge over the years. And it's a good synergy between my wife and I. She works in the pediatric area and works with a lot of children with special needs. So we kind of got that niche in our family.
I was going to say, it sounds like a family business.
Yes, it does. So that's kind of how I got started in the business, and that's kind of what we do in a nutshell.
Would you like to speak a little bit about your background in Indiana, where you come from?
Sure. Well, I'm a Hoosier, born and bred. I was actually born on the east side of the state and raised on the east side of the state, a little town called Liberty, Indiana. For those that don't know where that is, that's about 15 miles south of Richmond on the east side. So I'm born fairly close to Cincinnati, actually. If you talk about going to the big city when we were kids, that was Cincinnati versus Indianapolis because it was closer. So my dad's a farmer. He's semi-retired now, but I grew up in the country as a farm boy. I spent the first 20 years there. I'm guess you would call me more of a city boy now, simply because I've lived in the Indianapolis area longer than I've lived there, but I still consider myself a country boy at heart. So that's kind of where I grew up.
I think you told me a little bit, was it about your grandmother that you had helped? Because there's a little bit more of a backstory in how he has a strong connection to this community.
Yeah, it's very. I always asked the question, how did you really get into this area? And I call it a happy accident. The long but short story of it all is I started wanting to go into the law enforcement area of all places, and I had a professor one of my undergrad professors was a retired FBI agent. He was actually teaching at their academy, Quantico, for several years before he became a professor. And he basically pulled me aside one day and he said, if you're really serious about being a law enforcement officer, your talents probably are better served to be on the federal level. And if you'll go to law school, I'll make sure that you have a spot at Quantico when you graduate. So, make a long story short, moved to Indianapolis to start law school. was mixing paint at a local hardware store, and was kind of miserable at that because I did have an undergrad degree, and I just wanted to work in a law firm. I wasn't really looking for any particular area, just wanted to have some experience at a law firm. And a special needs and elder law firm was looking for, somebody to run stuff to the court, answer phones, just to kind of help their staff members out. And I said, that sounds good. And I applied. They brought me on. And within a few weeks, they had me as a case manager there, serving as basically as a paralegal for them. So I did that all through law school. Was able to stay on as an associate with them, and then was a partner a short time. But I've had my own firm. We'll be celebrating 13 years. Actually, we're in our 13th year, almost 14 years here.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And it's the best thing I've ever done. It's a very rewarding area of law. As I tell my trial attorney colleague once, who we had kind of a mutual client wasn't real happy that he couldn't spend his son's money on himself. Really? And he basically threatened me with some things. And I said, I don't know that I want to work this case anymore. And my trial attorney friend said, I don't understand the problem. I said, the guy just threatened me. And he says, happens to me all the time. I said, I don't get that. I get hugs from my clients. I don't get threats. So it's a very rewarding area. I can't imagine doing anything else, particularly in the area of law. I'd have to find probably a different profession if I wasn't in this service area. It's my passion.
Well, I think that's a really important part of a moral code, is it not? If you find something that you like and that you're good at, I do think that it speaks to you individually in your law firm that you have chosen to take a somewhat moral stance or have somewhat of a code. I think that's admirable.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it sounds cliche when we say we treat everyone like family, but we really do try to approach everyone with compassion and understanding of what they're going through. My son is very high functioning, but he's had some limitations over the years. So I can understand on a certain level, but certainly not to the level a lot of families are struggling. And I want to make sure that they know, I'm right there in the trenches with them. You're not just a number. We're not just going to shepherd you through and do a stack of paperwork for you and say goodbye. We really want to make sure we get to know you and make sure that we're helping you and your family the best way we can. I often say, if I can't help you, I'll find you a resource that we can connect you with that can help you. That's kind of our motto here. So that's what we kind of push here. That's our big thing here. And I have tried to create that culture where I have 3 very good staff who all kind of follow that same line. So very blessed and very fortunate. And no, I'm not just giving them an empty shout out with them. I really am blessed with the staff I have here.
Well, I am really glad that you shared that, because it's really important to have a supportive staff that also shares your vision. So if anybody would be interested in seeking out your services, we'll provide all the links below. And as you said, if for whatever reason you can't help them, then you're more than happy to guide them in the right direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. I guess I got off sideways too. My grandmother lived down the road from me. So my paternal grandmother lived down the road. My maternal grandparents were very involved. So this elder law niche just kind of fit. And in fact, when my paternal grandmother was sick, the family, including myself, we worked very hard in trying to keep her at home as long as we could before she entered an institution. And then even when she'd passed, my dad being the farmer out on the tractor during the day, I'd often field those phone calls from the attorney when he's helping wrap up her estate. So that's kind of, I call this all maybe divine intervention, if you want to call it, because that's kind of got my taste for it years before I even got to the law school area. And then when I got to law school and got that little job with the elder law firm, I think, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Well, when we were speaking earlier, because we always do a pre-podcast interview so I can really get a sense for people. And that story about your grandmother really stood out to me, because I think, anybody that's willing to sacrifice their time to care for somebody else that is in need, that is that showcases their empathy. And I think in this area, we really need to showcase people that have empathy. So I'll go ahead and let you speak about some of the things that you have planned here.
Okay.
And feel free, we can always circle back and speak about some other stories too.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start with a topic, and then I'm going to tell a few stories. The first topic that I just wanted to review with folks is folks that have a child with special needs that is approaching the age of majority, 18. Right. Age of majority is our fancy legal way of saying turning 18, becoming an adult by Indiana law. There's lots of things that the family needs to be aware of when they're approaching that magic age. And starting to plan maybe a year at least before that happens is going to be key. Because several things will occur. There's going to be changes potentially to eligibility with public benefits. There's changes to legal authority. There may even be changes to schooling and living arrangements. Not as much on that side, but it's always good to sit down and start planning these things out. You're going to hear me say over and over again, don't wait for a crisis. If you have a child that relies on you, you really need to be planning well ahead of time. Don't think you're going to be around forever, because that's the story I'm going to tell you here in a little bit, is about the parent who thought they were going to be around forever.
And can I ask you really quickly, how early should someone be planning? Is there a certain age limit, or would you recommend as soon as they are aware that there is some sort of other ability?
Yeah, I would say as soon as they're aware that there is some other ability there, simply because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And, somebody like me can kind of guide you through things that you might have or be not be aware of. So use some examples. Public benefits. A lot of folks aren't aware that there are benefits available for children through what they call a Medicaid waiver. So I'm going to give a brief introduction or a brief education of what that means, Medicaid waiver. So Medicaid itself is a needs-based program. It's federally funded, a majority. State picks up quite a bit as well. Depends on what level of services.
Sure.
But in any event, the feds outline a certain number of things that the state's package has to follow, and then the state fills in the details there. With a waiver, a state has went to the feds and said, we want to offer some additional services for our Medicaid recipients, but we don't want to offer that to every Medicaid applicant. We'd like you to waive that requirement. What a waiver typically provides is a lot of community supports or supports that the traditional Medicaid program doesn't provide. Anything from respite care to special therapies. I'll give a shout out to my wife again. She's working with horses.
Fabulous. Equine therapy.
Hippotherapy is one of her specialties that she works with. Well, that's something that is covered under a waiver that wouldn't be under a traditional Medicaid plan, for example. So those are things that's important to have with the waivers. The reason why I'm talking about this, the day that you may know that your child may have some other needs, those waivers, because of the limited number of slots, that's actually a limited number of dollars, there's scarce resources, and there's often a long wait list for them. So as soon as you have a diagnosis, you want to start calling up those waiver programs, getting on their wait list.
Right.
Simply because it might be a number of years. And maybe you don't think, I don't need that now. Doesn't matter. Do it now, because you never know what's going to come up in the future.
Right.
Get on those wait lists now. So that's one big thing, just on the early, before we even talk about 18 in those early years. Another important thing to know about a waiver is why under traditional Medicaid, eligibility considers both parents' income and assets,
Right.
a waiver disregards parents' income and assets. So they just look at the child's income and assets. And so long as your child's not independently wealthy, they probably qualify under their own assets and income limits. So that's another thing to be aware of. I think that's a common misconception that folks say, I'm not eligible for Medicaid, so I'm not even going to bother here. Well, with a waiver, it doesn't matter if mom and dad have decent jobs, and they probably have other children that they're raising as well. The waiver would still be available for their special needs child because of that exception to the rule. So again, starting that as soon as you have that need.
And what would you say as far as people that, Indiana is a very red state. I think there are a lot of people that are of this misconception that the Medicaid waiver is only for people that are very impoverished, or maybe they think the needs of their family aren't enough. What would you say to these type of people that would consider themselves, strong, hardworking people that think either we don't want to take these resources from other people that really need it, and how they should reevaluate their thinking around who should really take advantage of this program?
That's an excellent question. My take on that whole issue is you don't know what might happen in the future. So I would take advantage of pulling in as much resources as you can, as early as you can. We don't know when I'm a lawyer, so I've seen the worst of situations. I've seen deaths that occurred early on with parents. And then suddenly, that was great when we had dad that was living and that was maybe making a six-figure income. We don't need those resources because we can afford it and so on. But now, without dad in the picture, we really need those resources. And going back to what I said about years of waiting to get those resources, you don't want to wait till that crisis happens. The same thing with, you just could be losing a job. You just never know, particularly, we're seeing all sorts of crazy things in the economic environment in the last several months. You just don't know. And I don't think there's any reason to feel guilty about, am I taking a spot from somebody else that really needs it? These services aren't necessarily set up for, impoverishment's not required. I know that the Medicaid program, when it was created back in the late 60s and kind of implemented in the 70s, it was designed as a health insurance program for the poor. But it's Congress that has expanded the scope of this program over the years. Since 1988, Congress has started opening up this program to middle-class folks. In fact, it's kind of long-term care insurance for the elderly, for example.
Right.
Because Congress has designed it that way. No one's taking advantage of anything. We're not taking away from other people. We are doing what the government has set us up to do. And I think that gets lost sight of. I know this particular session of the General Assembly, it has been lost sight of. I've heard lots of horrible things about what I do for a living, for example. They make those arguments that should only be for these certain people, and and we lose sight of the people behind this. And I've worked real hard with several groups. I'm part of a coalition that we're trying to get these stories in front of our lawmakers so that they know that there's reasons why parents are caring for their special needs child. There's not resources out there, enough resources to go around. Even if we have Medicaid available, there's reasons why folks like me do what we do. There's just not enough money to go around to pay for things privately. People can't afford, if you have two kids, you can't afford to private pay for hippotherapy or aquatic therapy. It's if you don't have insurance, and that's unfortunately still a good deal of people, we need these services. So I don't think that anyone should ever feel guilty. I don't think my dad would have a problem with me kind of mentioning. Sometimes it's a pride thing. Of course. We don't want to do this or do part of that. But you don't want to be stuck where you don't have the resources. And I know I'm cut from the same cloth. We're hardworking, of course, salt of the earth people, and we don't take handouts. But it's not a handout. It's a service that's there for folks.
Well, and I think last time I checked, and I'll do some fact checking on this, but I think the median salary in Indiana is still somewhere around $52,000 to $53,000. That just really isn't a lot of money. And if you have at least one child that has some sort of other ability, I have 3 with autism, for example. I haven't sat down to do the numbers on how much I spend on diapers. Once your child is 3 years old, there is an element of insurance that can cover diapers, which now all 3 of my children are over 3, so they are taking advantage of that, which has really been a lifesaver. But I still have to buy diapers on the side. Diapers, wipes, cream. They still use bottles. We go through a lot of milk. They are in ABA therapy. We have to drive to Crawfordsville to do that. So that's about 30 miles away. You have to put gas in your vehicle to do that. I'm using these examples to say I'm from a very rural part of Indiana. There are a lot of people from very rural parts of Indiana that may not know what services are available, and even to get them to the services costs a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason we're talking about some of these things, so that people are aware, anyone in your family, be them elderly or other abled, young, there's been a lot of fighting and a lot of struggle to get these type of programs. There's an origin story to all of these things. So that's why I asked Jeff to speak a little bit more about this. Now, I'd also like to hear a little bit more about your coalition. Would you be comfortable speaking more about it and what it's called?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we have a name for it, but and I'm kind of a minor cog in this. I helped set it up, but others have kind of taken the lead for it. Yeah, taking the lead of it. This actually come about from what was the age disabled waiver. Now it's the pathways and the health and wellness, when they split it up last July and privatized that whole process. But what had happened now it was 2023. So in December of 2023, the state Medicaid office, I call it a mistake. They call it an underestimate, but in any event, their budget was $1 billion off. Mm-hmm. And so their solution was to start lopping off services, particularly with probably a lot of folks have heard on your audience here. They eliminated family caregiving payments and wanted to push everybody into structured family care, which pays much less, sometimes fewer hours. It's a cost saving measure. That's all it was. But another thing that they did was a lot of the seniors who were relying on community-based services, staying out of nursing homes. No one wants to go to a nursing home. And we've been very fortunate in the state of Indiana to have coverage for alternatives such as assisted living, adult daycare, home care. Well, they decided that they were going to stop funding on those services for their fiscal year. They had overshot their budget, and even though that hadn't been an issue in 11 years, suddenly we had a wait list. And not only did we have a wait list, I had several clients where they had promised services to, and said, "Oh, never mind, we're not going to give you the services." So, for example, I had a woman who had moved into an assisted living facility, given up her apartment, she is impoverished, and suddenly didn't have any way to pay for the assisted living that she was moved into. Fortunately, she had a grandson who was willing to take her and her daughter in. And after spending a year, we finally got her back to the place where she wanted to be to begin with. Well, when all this was occurring, obviously, elder attorneys were concerned about our clients. Their rights are getting stepped on here. I'm lawsuits and so on, trying to clean things up. But at the same time, we've got all these healthcare providers, both those that already were serving folks, plus those that were encouraged by the state to enter into contracts to start serving folks. 5 years ago, there was only a handful of assisted living facilities, for example, that were Medicaid certified. Now there's several, and that's because that's what the state was encouraging folks to do, so encouraging entities to do. Well, suddenly they pull the rug out from under them and say, well, we got no funding for you. So as a result, this kind of coalition pulled together. So there's a number of entities that's in this, from the Assisted Living Association, and butchering their official title, but it's an organization, assisted living facilities.
And we'll provide links to all this in the notes underneath. So,
Excellent.
You know,
Excellent.
we don't have to stress about remembering everything right now.
Yeah, but the Arc of Indiana is part of that coalition, of course. Gosh, and they keep adding on, so it's kind of remembering everybody's. There's about 5 or 6 different entities that's part of that coalition, and their charge right now is again trying to get these stories out to legislators, because there's just not an understanding. They see dollar signs and they don't understand the impact of. I don't think most understand the impact of what's going on here. I'm going to take the optimistic side, that they don't understand what they're doing, instead of just being cold-hearted and saying to them.
Well, you know, I think we discussed I'm also from a foreign family, and my family's been here since it was Indian territory, and we've had a lot of relatives that have participated in most of the major wars that we've had and that sort of thing. I come from a family that doesn't mind getting their hands dirty, and I think that's a perfect example. Right. It doesn't necessarily matter which political party that you serve, but I think it's a more Hoosier thing to do, to get your hands literally in the dirt, as they say. So if you are curious about some of these things, don't be afraid to ask people. It takes several hands to get a garden going sometimes. And so, if you're curious, get your hands dirty, come out. See some of these different assisted living services that people have. Try and be a cog in the wheel. Try and figure out how things work. And you can't just look at a paper. Sometimes you have to go and physically see something.
Yeah. Don't roll over and just. That's the way it's supposed to be. I encourage as many people as I can, and since I've got an audience here, your audience are affected most by these. Directly by these cuts and rearrangement of services and so on. And so you're a constituent. It doesn't take but a half hour to write a quick summary of, this is how these services assist my family, and this is what would happen if these services go away, and ship that off to your legislator. The more they hear from people, the more attention you're going to get. If they hear nothing, they're going to assume, my constituents think I'm doing a great job of balancing the budget on the backs of these folks that are, whatever they think, taking advantage of the system. That the other thing that my pet peeve is hearing all these folks that are just taking these services when they really could be working, and now we got to have work requirements. There's a lack of understanding. A lot of these people, they want to work, they can't.
Right.
Or they do work, but they don't have employment to the level that provides the benefits through their employment. It has nothing to do with being a deadbeat person or taking advantage of the system. Are there a few bad apples out there? Absolutely. And I've encountered them in my practice.
Sure.
I've kicked people out of here before. But that's the minority. We don't have $1 billion worth of waste going on because people are taking advantage of the system. It's just not happening.
Well, and if you're old-fashioned like myself, I did go and tour the state capitol last week and found out that if you want to speak to someone, sometimes you have to call their office, but they are there Monday through Thursday. Fridays they do tours of the Capitol building, which I happen to go on a Friday because Fridays are my day off. And I like to actually speak to people and get a sense for how someone is. I'm pretty certain that's a very Indiana sort of way of doing things. I was raised around a bunch of farmers that wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and go into a local breakfast place and eat together and drink coffee, and then they go off to the field. So I've watched this replicated many ways over. I think that, if it's hard for you, or if you think they won't take you seriously, go and knock on their door. That's what they're there for.
Absolutely.
They're here to serve you, so they shouldn't be above having a conversation with you. And, if you don't catch them the first time, just keep knocking. Just keep pestering them until they hear you. If you don't want to send a letter, if you don't want to call, just keep going to that state house. They have parking very near the building, and it doesn't cost that much. So just put your face in front of them if you don't want to call.
In contrary to what seems to be somewhat the political environment right now, you have a voice in the way laws are made. And I don't think that some people understand that as well. If there is a regulation that's being proposed, if there is a law that's being proposed, you have the right to testify. You can come in and testify and tell your story. I know not everyone's a good public speaker. Not everyone wants to get up in front of a crowd. But if you're that type of person, you have the right to be heard. I've testified several times, both in the General Assembly and on behalf of folks at Medicaid rulemaking process. It has an effect. Don't think your words mean nothing. It does have an effect.
It's powerful, I think, show up, bring your kids, wheel them up in their wheelchairs and use your crutches and crawl up the stairs if you have to make yourself heard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That has an effect. Absolutely.
I know we're really bringing the gavel down, but I'm really passionate about these things. And, being a mother of 3 children that greatly need these services and pulling in and out of their school every day and watching how many kids are cycling through that building, it really hits home. That's just one school. That's one ABA school. And knowing that there's a 2.5 year wait list on the Medicaid waiver, these things, they're important. These are conversations that we should be having, and we shouldn't skimp on children with disabilities or skimp on the elderly or, make excuses for bad behavior, because at the end of the day, we're all Hoosiers, right? And part of being a Hoosier, from what I recall and from what I was taught, is taking care of people and, investing in our communities and taking care of one another. And I don't think that it's a Hoosier attribute to leave people that are needing services to the side. Like I didn't grow up in a family like that. I didn't grow up in a community like that where, anybody that's suffering, we just toss them to the side. Most of these small towns have more churches than they do anything else. So I would also speak to these people who have children or the elderly with any kind of disability. Use your faith too. Your faith is powerful. Mm-hmm. And last time I checked, Jesus wasn't someone that was like, well, let's just get rid of everybody that we don't need.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Gavel down. Here you go. You can talk some more.
That's fine. No, we were on the same page with that. I was actually trying to hold my tongue a little bit as we got started.
Don't hold your tongue. We're good. We can talk about what we want here.
Yeah. In all honesty, it's been a frustrating spring because there's been a lot of issues just with the Medicaid office. And I guess that's a good segue into another issue that I was going to talk about, and that is, don't assume that if you have a child or a family member with public benefits and you've gotten a notification from the agency on anything, whether it's a reduction in services or you need a termination or you're not doing this right, or don't assume that that's correct. I can't think of the last time that, and we probably process, a half a dozen to a dozen Medicaid applications a month for folks. Mm-hmm. I can't think of the last time where we had a correct notice of action from filing an application. There's seems to be always something we have to go back and correct. And I hate to knock the folks that are serving these individuals, but they're understaffed. I don't know if they're trained well. We've kind of went from I'm old. I'm a bit around a while, so I do remember the days when you filed for Medicaid and you worked with a human being, and you would go in and meet with a human being, and they would be the one assigned, a person assigned to your case, and their job was to help you get through your application and make sure you got connected to the right services under the public benefits programs. And we've now been, that's all been replaced by computer systems and tickets and call centers and things like that. So never, ever assume that what you're being told or what you've been receiving in the mail is correct. Always challenge that. Always just, do some research, call an attorney. And another thing, a little tidbit, I always tell my clients, if you have services in place and you get a notice that says either they're reducing or terminating benefits, appeal first. Appeal first, ask questions later. And the reason being, if you appeal before that action takes place, then your services have to stay in place while you're working out whatever issue that is. And I know the initial reaction is, I'm going to call the office up because this is a mistake. And as you're talking that through, suddenly that date of action has transpired and you've lost benefits, and maybe they'll come back, they'll get them back in place. But if you appeal first, then those benefits are in place while you're now working that out instead of the opposite. So one thing everyone should leave here with for me today is appeal first, ask questions later. That's real key.
Well, coincidentally, I got a phone call from my aunt yesterday, and I have a cousin that has some special needs, and they got a notice in the mail that his services were being canceled, or she thinks. So my advice was to go to the FSSA office in town and speak to them. But I'm glad that you gave that information right now, because I might have her call you.
Yeah.
Because I know my cousin, he's been struggling for years, and he had an accident quite a few years ago where he has a brace on his leg and he could barely walk and barely stand up on it. And like I said, we come from hard, farm working people, and my aunt for years was just paying for everything. And now my aunt is retired and my cousin's still disabled, and I don't know what kind of benefits he has, but I'm just using that as an example of the type of families that we have in Indiana. We don't have people that generally, like you said, we have a few bad apples, but we have people that are struggling and have been struggling for years and don't know which way to go and don't know who to talk to. So that's a large part of why I'm doing this podcast. It's not just for kids like mine. It's for adults, like you said, after 18, all the way until death. We really need to make sure that people are aware, people are connected, and even to the point where if you have to fight for your rights, or if you have people in your family that are not being served, well, you can also fight for their rights. Go to bat for these people. If you don't feel that you're being listened to, or you don't feel that your family members are being well served, now's a good time to bang that gavel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Bang, bang, bang.
And the old adage, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's exactly what it is. Yeah. Well, so one of the things I also wanted to make sure that we addressed here today was, again, those changes that do occur when a child turns 18. We already talked about, gosh, as soon as you have a diagnosis, you probably want to reach out and start gathering information about these programs that are available and getting on the lists and even getting them in place. When someone turns 18, lots of stuff happens. Addressing the public benefits first. If someone has had public benefits, there very well could be several big changes that are going to occur there at age 18 or in the years right after. One is with Medicaid itself. I haven't counted recently, but at any given time, there's generally about 30 different categories of Medicaid. And every category has different qualification criteria. Some just look at income, some look at assets and income, some just require you to be, a child under the age of 19 or child under 21. And so when someone hits that magic age of 18, one thing that may be occurring there is a need to transition to a different Medicaid category. And mistakes will happen there. Oh, what category is 19? Oh, now you're 19. You no longer have Medicaid. Now, federal law requires the state to take that child, adult, and look at different categories that they may fit into since they're aging out of that one. Doesn't always happen that way. You'll just get a notice saying, "Oh, now that you're over the age of 19, you're done, and you no longer have services." You want to be proactive. You want to be in front of that. You want to know, okay, they're in a category. And by the way, if you're not sure of the category, you can always go into your portal. They will tell you what category of services that they're receiving benefits from. If you're still not sure, folks like me, the ARC, free service, you can call and say, what does this mean? Because sometimes there are abbreviations. You're like, I don't know what MAC means, for example. They can help you interpret. But back to that category change, if you need to make a category, you want to be in front of that, not behind it. You don't want to wait. You don't want to assume that the office is going to take care of you.
It's better to be proactive.
You want to be proactive. So that's one thing with Medicaid, particularly if there's a waiver. Long wait list for a waiver. You don't want to be caught with, I needed to make a category change. The Medicaid office failed to make my change for me. They terminated my services. I lost my waiver. I may have been able to get my Medicaid turned back on, but that waiver, and now I'm back on the wait list again.
Right.
Years and you don't want any of that to happen. So being proactive with the public benefits. Another thing that I don't think a lot of families are aware of is there is a income program. It's called Supplemental Security Income, or SSI. It's designed for recipients who aren't otherwise eligible for other Social Security programs, but are disabled and have help with their basic needs.
Right.
And under 18, a lot of kids don't qualify because the Social Security office does look at mom's and dad's assets, mom and dad's income. But at age 18, they age out of that. So they're just looking at that child's income and assets. So there's a benefit that can help come in to help pay for additional support services. We're now in a state here where we've lost maybe some family caregiving payments. Well, there's a way maybe to offset some of that. If you're not aware of that, you can apply for SSI and get those dollars coming in. So that's another program I don't think a lot of families are aware of because, I was told we weren't eligible for that. Well, that was true when your child was 6, but now that they're 18, they are eligible for it. And I'll also add with that program for families who have the benefit. If the child has the benefit, they will also start reevaluating disability. And unfortunately, I've seen the Social Security Office be obtuse sometimes with that reevaluation. And you have rights there as well. And I'll tell a story here. I have a client. It's been a few years back, but he had SSI. It was he and his mom. They were struggling, and mom had been taking care of him for years. She was a nurse, but she got the hours in when she could, but he was really needed full-time care. And so the SSI was a big benefit to them while he was growing up. He turned 18, and Social Security Administration says, well, now we got to reevaluate your disability. Nothing had changed. But we need to reevaluate your disability. Go see this psychologist, and he will determine whether you're still disabled.
Right.
Well, that psychologist came back and said, no, he's not disabled. Well, I'm going to knock the psychologist, but the psychologist is getting paid by Social Security Administration. So the case got to me. That child had rights. They could choose their own doctor to do that evaluation. You didn't have to use the Social Security Administration's doctor. So, we went back, we got our own opinion from his own psychologist he'd been seeing for the last 6 years,
Right.
who said, absolutely, he's disabled. He had a traumatic brain injury, and you know, why, yes, he could like work in the laundromat. I remember he could work in the laundromat in full clothes and so on. Yes, he could, but the problem with his injury is when the boss said, you're not folding that right, he could get aggressive with his boss. So it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And so we were able to bring that psychologist in. We had to go to a hearing and so on.
Yeah.
But that's, again, something to know. Even if you have those benefits, there can be changes, and you want to make sure, again, you're in front of that. Don't rely on the resources they provide you. You can bring your own doctor in. And do know they may be looking at, or are you still fitting our definition of disability? So there's those things that go in there.
I'd like to mention something too. We don't want to go back to like disabled people working in sweatshops for pennies on the dollar. There's this book, I think I've mentioned it before, called Neurotribes. Anybody that hasn't read that book should get it, because there is a story in there where they talk about things like that. And I think we should be very, very careful in how we proceed with taking rights out of people's hands and letting other people that don't really know them, that is not their family member, for example, determining what level of sufficiency they have and what they are able to do. Because it's a slippery slope. And we don't want to go back to doing things that were not helpful or violated people's rights to where people are being taken advantage of.
Absolutely. We're on the same page with that. So that's one thing to be aware of. Another big thing to be aware of: when someone turns 18, they have legal capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Medically, they may not have capacity, but in the eyes of the law, they have legal capacity. And so at that point, your child could say, when they go to the doctor, I don't want mom in here, go on. Mm-hmm. Or I'm leaving school. I'm 18 now. You can't keep me here. There's all those things that go in with turning 18. So making sure that there's still that advocate, so that person protecting the child at 18. I mean, gosh, there are a lot of kids of that don't have other abilities that probably shouldn't be making decisions at 18. But more important here is you need those folks that probably still needs that support structure around them. And at age 18, they're their own person. So a few things to know about legal authority there. Mm-hmm. There are kind of 3 levels. One is guardianship. That's kind of the most intrusive level. Mm-hmm. And then on the bottom rung, there is the child being able to have enough capacity to make their own plan through a power of attorney or appointing their health care representative. And in between there's a new concept called supportive decision making. Mm-hmm. So addressing those 3, let me start with the power of attorney and the health care representative, because I want to stay out of the court if we can. Right? We don't want to have guardianships in place for people. We don't want. It's one thing the guardianship does is it says this person has no rights, or it limits their rights, and we don't want that. So, an autism diagnosis does not mean you don't have the capacity to say, I want my mom to go to the doctor with me and help me make medical decisions. Right. An autism diagnosis does not mean I recognize that I don't do real well on balancing a checkbook or managing numbers. I need somebody else to do that. Mm-hmm. That's still sufficient capacity to say, I'm going to appoint somebody else to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's one easy way to take care of that issue when someone turns 18.
Right.
Now, sometimes on the far end with the guardianship, there is the capacity there to make those decisions. Or maybe you do have a child that is real easy, at least susceptible to undue influence. Right? I'll talk a lot of that through with the parents of, all right, if somebody went up to your child and said, "Oh, I love that watch. Can I have it?" Would they just take it off their arm and hand it to them? Okay, maybe we ought to look at guardianship. Because chances are, as they get older, when the cell phone guy comes up and says, "Hey, why don't you buy this cell phone?" If they're under guardianship and they can sign right up and they're stuck in that contract. Yeah. So sometimes guardianship is needed just for that reason. But when we're looking at guardianship, we're still even trying to limit that authority as much as we can, because a full guardianship means I don't have the right to choose to marry someone. I don't have the right to choose to have children. I don't have the right to vote. So we want to be real careful to use that tool only in circumstances where it's absolutely necessary. Only when I don't really have the capacity at all to do things for myself, or I really need somebody to protect me. I need that kind of shelter around me, because I'll easily do things that'll get myself in trouble. In my opinion, that's the only time a guardianship really needs to be necessary. Otherwise, can we do one of these alternatives? Now, I mentioned the healthcare power. That was bad. We don't have power of attorney anymore. Healthcare representative, or the financial power of attorney. In between there, we have a new concept in Indiana. It's been around for a while, but Indiana just adopted rules a few years ago called supported decision making. And the concept there is we want high-functioning adults with limitations to have as much independence in making their own decisions as we can. So a supportive decision-making arrangement is putting a team around that adult to guide them in making a decision for themselves, not someone else substituting their decision for them.
Right.
And so oftentimes what a supporting decision-making team will be is, there might be, a head individual that they're in charge of just stepping in when there is a problem. Okay, we're having trouble getting information from the bank. I do have the authority, legal authority, I must step in and do that. But that's very sparing. Then you have the boots on the ground. These are the folks that help open the mail and go by the mail and say, okay, you need to respond to this, or, make doctor's appointments. The doctor says this, and here's, let me talk you through kind of what that means. What do you think there? That's what the boots on the ground mean. And they can also involve legal. I'm part of a supported decision-making team. It can involve the ARC of Indiana's, their ARC Trust. They don't have a family with the ARC Trust. They're part of that supported decision-making team. I think it's a really cool concept. It's still in infancy, and there's a lot of work to do, I think, to develop this. But to me, that's a nice in-between thing. So again, if we can avoid guardianship, we want to. And again, when we're turning 18, these are the things to be thinking about that they can get in place now. So a couple things that I just wanted to make sure families were aware of, that 18 things change significantly. I know, practically speaking, you may not see a lot of changes, but there is some legalities behind it, and you want to make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. Maybe the doctor does still say, Tabitha, this is what's going on with your son, what do you want to do? But technically, the doctor's hands could be tied if your son says, I don't want mom out of this room while we're talking about this. So I want to get in front of that.
We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.